The president yesterday signed a memo ending, I guess, any chance that the United States would proceed with the TPP. Senator Bernie Sanders, whom you endorsed and I endorsed in the primary, yesterday said this was a good first step.
A very good thing. It was time to drive a stake through this agreement. But let's understand this, that while on that issue, the president got it right, that is an anti-worker strategy, the TPP. On every other way, he is siding with big, powerful special interests and hurting workers. Look at who he nominated for labor secretary, an individual, Andy Puzder, who has specialized in grinding workers into the ground. Look what he's done with the health secretary, nominating someone who wants to take health care away from the middle class and our seniors. Education secretary, someone who wants to tear down public education. You know, my dad was a mechanic. I grew up in a blue-collar community. I live in a blue-collar community today. My father said to me, son, the cool thing is we live in an America where if you go through the doors of that school and you work hard, you can do just about anything here in our nation. And that, I thought that was so cool because we didn't live on the affluent side of the tracks.
Yeah, right. But that's, but you know what's strange, Senator, is so many people voted for that kind of a background, right? Voted for Donald Trump because they believed his message.
Well, his message was he's going to fight against Wall Street, he's going to help workers, and he's going to drain the swamp. And he's done the opposite on all three. Take the very first executive order he signed, which was to charge low-income families $500 more per year under FHA to buy a home. And why did he do that? Because Wall Street doesn't like the competition from FHA on mortgages. So he hurt workers and their home ownership opportunities to do a big favor to big banks.
Back to TPP. Is now what happens now, I guess. So we're not going to move forward with TPP, which you said on that one thing is a good move. But are there going to be new and better trade deals?
Well, I think the focus now...
And is that an area where Democrats perhaps can work with this administration?
I think the focus now has to be on reducing the enormous trade deficits with Mexico and China. They constitute 90% of our trade deficit. And essentially, you can look at it like this. If we sent our athletes to an Olympics and our athletes had to run uphill while the competitors got to run downhill, we would lose almost all the time. And that's what we do with these agreements. We say you can have full access to our market, Mexico, while you pay a fraction of the minimum wage we pay, while you have a fraction of the environmental rules that we have, while you have a fraction of the enforcement. So, of course, we give a huge advantage to the manufacturer outside our borders. And people just need to understand, when you give a huge advantage to your competitor wins. And when the company wins that's overseas, you lose the factory in America, you lose the supply chain, you lose the payroll being spent in the grocery store and the gas station, and you create downward pressure on all the rest of the workers. And that is what's been happening for the last 4 decades. Our American workers have been getting the short end of the stick. Virtually all the new income for 4 decades going to the top 10%. That's 9 out of 10 Americans out in the cold. That drove the frustration that helped fuel, in part, the Bernie campaign and the Trump campaign. And unfortunately, the Trump won the general election.
One other issue, the president yesterday met, in addition to his meeting with business leaders, he met with some labor leaders yesterday evening and talked in the brief moments when the media was allowed in, that said there were 2 items on the agenda. One were the trade deals, and the other was infrastructure. He has talked about infrastructure, just again, like Bernie Sanders did, infrastructure, creating millions of new jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure, and God knows it needs it. What are your expectations there?
Well, the devil is in the details. What we anticipate is he's going to give vast tax credits to companies to be intermediaries and do toll roads and toll bridges.
Which is not...
We
right.
hate toll roads in Oregon. They're regressive. They cost much more for us as a country than to build it by borrowing it internationally at 2 or 3%, which is we have the gift of being able to borrow cheaply. You put in an intermediary who makes a 15% rate of return. That's very different than borrowing it at 2 or 3%. And furthermore, we call them freeways for a reason. they're free. They are common infrastructure that we do together, and you don't have this hassle of stopping all the time. And so I'm concerned to see what his package will look like.